I'm glad you're here. My name is Kelsey Hofer. I'm the Director of Counseling Services here at Antioch College. In the next 13 minutes or so, we're going to take some time together to explore secondary traumatic stress, including what it is, what it's not, how we can help prevent it for our students and ourselves, and then also lastly, how we can heal from it if it becomes too difficult. Let's start off by exploring what exactly is secondary traumatic stress. Secondary traumatic stress is the emotional reactions that occur when someone is indirectly exposed to the trauma of another person. This could be witnessing a traumatic event that someone else is going through, hearing about that traumatic event, or even just seeing how someone else is impacted by a trauma that they went through. You may be familiar with terms such as burnout, compassion fatigue, or vicarious trauma. These are all ways in which contact with trauma-based material can impact someone. Secondary traumatic stress is similar to these, but unique in that symptoms mirror those of post-traumatic stress disorder. Have you seen any of these symptoms in our students, our staff, or maybe ourselves? Next, let's look at strategies that we can use all across campus to be able to help our students not experience some of these challenging symptoms. Individuals may be more likely to experience these symptoms if they have a trauma history. Researchers have found that 85% of college students have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime, and 21% of students have experienced a trauma in college. Different classes or workspaces may also lead to different levels of exposure to trauma-based material. For example, a psychology course focusing on childhood abuse will probably have more trauma-based material than Algebra 101. This isn't a bad thing. Those entering the human services field need to be prepared to deal with hearing about abuse. But these courses might need to incorporate different levels of support to help students and faculty address potential secondary traumatic stress. Faculty administration, and staff can all support students by preventing high levels of secondary traumatic stress. We'll explore each in more detail next. Even before the quarter starts, when faculty are choosing content for their course, they can be mindful of the potential of secondary traumatic stress. Trauma-specific content should have intentionality regarding pacing, with variation and balance between first-person accounts of trauma and more abstract information. Titration can be utilized, including starting with small bits of trauma-specific information being utilized purposefully and cautiously. Research shows that giving students a clear theoretical lens through which to consider the trauma-related material can be a protective factor to developing secondary traumatic stress symptoms, as it provides a cognitive lens to view trauma and reduces levels of overwhelmedness with the trauma-specific material. Writing of syllabus and information in Canvas can also be done to prevent secondary traumatic stress. This can include clear information around what to expect in the course, and should be as detailed as possible, such as including themes to be covered in each class session and noting what sorts of audio or video material may be shown that include trauma-specific themes. Again, research shows that these trigger warnings are actually more helpful when shown in advance, so that students can prepare or decide to not attend, rather than the trigger warning occurring right before traumatic material, when the student may not feel able to or have time to make a good decision for themselves. This gives students voice and choice, two key components of trauma-informed care. Faculty should also include in the course material information specifically around secondary traumatic stress, including symptoms to look out for, protective factors, and ways in which navigating trauma content may actually lead to vicarious resilience. When choosing assignments, faculty can provide opportunities for students to share personal reflection as a way for them to process the experience of trauma-based content. Providing this as an assignment option, and not only in a class setting, might allow students to feel safer, naming their emotional reactions and giving them time to process information from class. This may be especially important at the beginning of the course, for students to consider how their own stuff may show up throughout the course. But it's important for these to have no expectation of self-disclosure. Additionally, faculty should offer assignment flexibility that mirrors students' levels of reactivity, but without changing any of the academic requirements. This could include alternative assignments or different formats of assignments. Lastly, prevention of secondary traumatic stress also, of course, can happen in the classroom itself. Experts name the importance of focus on peer supports, as students may feel safer sharing their reactions or struggles in a peer setting. Faculty can help set these up, such as a Canvas discussion board post or a group chat feature dedicated to trauma-related reflection and peer support. Faculty should also support students with ensuring time to debrief in class after a challenging topic is covered. Faculty administration can also support students in avoiding secondary traumatic stress. Classes with high trauma content should be scheduled intentionally, such as not being early morning classes or letting out after dark when students might feel more fear. They should also not be long classes, as handling trauma content should occur in shorter time periods for more time for processing and decompressing between classes. Trigger warnings can also come into play even before the first day of class, with students being clearly informed by the course description of any trauma-specific content areas, so they can make an informed decision around if it's wise for them to enroll in the course or not. Many ways of supporting students in preventing secondary traumatic stress are true across all staff and faculty on campus. We can all model and teach about self-care, including use of relaxation techniques, self-regulation, and boundary setting. Demonstrating healthy boundaries might mean not always being available to students, but in the end, showing that it's okay to put energy into oneself as needed is a key way to support students in being able to name their own self-care needs. As a student worker supervisor, this self-care could include intentional time with breathing or grounding during supervision meetings. In classroom settings, self-care goals could be incorporated into an assignment or small group activity. Research has found that handling difficult content can feel less overwhelming if there are opportunities for related empowerment. Social advocacy and volunteering can be ways to achieve this. In a classroom setting, this may include a social advocacy project as part of the course syllabus. For staff, it might include supporting students you interact with to find ways to put energy into making changes, rather than only feeling overwhelmed with the way things are right now. For example, I previously volunteered with the Monument Quilt Project, a group that covered the National Mall in Washington, D.C. with quilt squares to advocate for increased funding to be put towards ending sexual violence. Flexibility is a key component of working with students who may be experiencing symptoms of secondary traumatic stress. This involves a balance between ensuring that students can take the time they need to re-regulate, while also making sure that academic and workplace expectations are upheld. In academic settings, this could include allowing a 2-day extension for a student experiencing secondary traumatic stress symptoms, but not allowing them an ongoing extension or to be able to skip the assignment altogether. For staff members supervising a student worker, this could mean allowing your student worker to take a break during their shift if needed based on mental health struggles following a challenging trauma-filled class, but that they needed to clock out for that break, as they will be working on self-regulation and not their employment assignments. Disclosure of a student's own trauma history can be challenging to handle, as there has to be a balance between offering support while also acknowledging the various roles that we play. Research encourages educators to plan for disclosure in advance. In the classroom, that might look like addressing how disclosure should and should not be discussed in class. As an example, a faculty member could ask students to not disclose any of their own trauma histories in group discussions, as that could be triggering to others, but that they are welcome to name in written assignments ways in which any of their own stuff is being activated by the class content. Staff members working with students who make disclosures can listen and validate and support, while also naming boundaries around their ability to support related student needs. All of those who hear disclosures by others should clearly name limits of confidentiality, such as requirement to report instances of current child abuse to the county and to report sexual violence on campus to the Title IX office. Faculty and staff should also recognize when a student may need more support than they're able to give. This is when a referral to the Counseling Services Department or external counseling services might be helpful. One of the easiest ways to do this is to tell the student that they matter and their experiences matter and they deserve to get support around them, and ask if it's okay to connect them over email with a counselor. This shows the student that you care, but also aren't always the right person to process trauma histories with them. And the warm handoff can help the students feel safe to pursue additional options for support. It's also important to take care of ourselves. It's hard to help others with their struggles if we don't first do the work to heal us. Secondary traumatic stress is a normal experience to hearing about trauma, meaning that we, as student supporters, are also at risk. That doesn't make anyone weak or stupid. Research actually shows that helpers with more empathy in their work are actually more likely to have challenging levels of secondary traumatic stress. Faculty and staff can be impacted in various ways. If you've experienced any of these situations and had any of the secondary traumatic stress symptoms discussed earlier, there could be a connection. Secondary traumatic stress is a normal reaction to hearing or seeing challenging things. Fortunately, it's also something we can all heal from, individually and collectively. If we aren't able to prevent the impact of secondary traumatic stress, it's important to recognize the symptoms we discussed before and be intentional about creating healing. Many of the things we can do for ourselves mirror the ways that we're trying to support our students. We should engage in self-care and self-compassion if needed, including knowing that things that give us emotional energy and ground us back to our work. We should set and keep boundaries. This might look different for each of us. For me, it involves not engaging with work outside of work hours, so my body knows that after 5 p.m. on a workday, it can relax and not have to engage with any of the potential trauma narratives that were part of my counseling sessions that day. We should all be aware of what leads to activation for us, and be sure that we don't allow that to turn into aggression or snippiness with students or other staff or faculty. Instead, we should talk ourselves through them with self-compassion and take breaks as needed to ensure we don't pass on secondary traumatic stress to others. Just like we recommend counseling to students who experience secondary traumatic stress, counseling is always recommended for all staff and faculty. Antioch is a beautiful place and also carries a lot of trauma, both institutionally and in the members of the community. Seeking help is not shameful, but it actually shows strength, bravery, and wisdom. You can get support through your insurance company or Antioch's EAP program. If you need support navigating these systems, please reach out to myself or the HR office. I hope the recommendations that you've heard today can help each of us individually and Antioch collectively know how to be successful with handling secondary traumatic stress and how to heal if it becomes overwhelming. This is only one part of trauma-informed care initiatives that I'm hoping can continue all across campus. If you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share with me, I'd always be open to a conversation. If you'd like to read more about some of the research named in this presentation, take a look at these fascinating articles.